I shouldn't have said it. Not out loud. But the words had slipped before I could catch them, carried by some recklessness I hadn't realized I possessed. And now, I'm standing by the counter of her little bookstore, avoiding her gaze, pretending to scan the spines of books I've already memorized. Her name is Marianne. She's the kind of woman who doesn't need to announce herself to fill a room. At 40-something, she moves with this easy, deliberate confidence, like she knows exactly what she wants and doesn't waste energy on the rest. Her hair is streaked with silver at the temples, soft against her collarbone, and she wears those oversized cardigans that make her look both approachable and untouchable at the same time. She's arranging a new display of poetry books, tilting each one with the precision of someone who treats objects the way most people treat art. I glance at her, and I know she feels it too. That subtle charge in the air. The pause before she turns to answer me. The way her lips press together for a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible, but enough that I catch it. My hands tighten around the paperback I'm holding, as if it could ground me, stop me from doing something stupid. You're staring, she says finally, not angry, not teasing, just stating it like a fact. The words linger between us, soft but sharp, and I have to force myself not to stumble over them. I trail off, because whatever excuse I could offer sounds hollow. And maybe she knows it. Her eyes, a cool green that can shift in the light, hold mine a second too long. I feel a strange, electric discomfort, like stepping into a room that's too hot, but refusing to leave. Then she smiles. Not the polite bookstore smile she gives every customer, but a small, knowing one that makes the corners of her eyes crease just right. It's brief, but it lands. I think you might be enjoying this more than you're letting on, she says, tilting her head, as if she's reading some thought I didn't mean to have. I can't tell if she's teasing or accusing me, or both. I clear my throat and try to focus on the titles in front of me, pretending the dim light above the counter makes it easier to look away. But my brain doesn't follow suit. I replay the little things, the tilt of her chin when she adjusts a book, the faint scent of jasmine that seems to linger in her wake, the gentle hum of the cash register she's half listening to. All of it presses against my chest in a way I can't ignore. Then she does something that makes me stop entirely. She hands me a book. One I didn't ask for, one I didn't even notice on the shelf. Her fingers brush mine, light and fleeting, and it's enough to make my pulse spike. Here, she says softly. I thought you might like this one. I take it, fumbling slightly, aware of the warmth of her hand against mine. Words fail me, not because I'm shy, though I am, but because every instinct I have is telling me to stay, to remember this moment, to carve it into memory like some secret thing no one else can touch. I leave the counter, my mind still tangled in that brief connection. Outside, the hum of the street feels distant, muted, as though the city has shrunk to the space between us. And I can't stop thinking about the way her eyes lingered on me, even after I left. Even now, I catch myself looking back, hoping, somehow, that she'll notice. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. The bookstore's bell jingled behind me as I stepped inside, carrying a stack of returned books from my own apartment. An excuse, though even I knew it wasn't necessary. Marianne was behind the counter, the sunlight catching the silver streaks in her hair, casting faint glints across her tired eyes. She was wearing that same oversized cardigan, but it looked heavier somehow, like she had slept little and carried the weight of it all through the morning. Hey, I said, quieter than I intended. She glanced up, and her eyes flicked over me in that way that felt like a reading lamp, scanning, measuring. She didn't smile immediately, just tilted her head slightly, a small crease between her brows betraying concentration, or maybe irritation. Thanks for bringing these back, she said finally, taking the stack from me. Her hands brushed mine once, a quick contact, and then she pulled back. I noticed the faint tremor in her fingers, subtle but there, as if she was trying to steady herself without asking anyone for help. We started putting the books away together. It was awkward at first, her movements efficient, precise, her distance palpable. I trailed behind her, noticing the little details I wouldn't have caught otherwise, the faint scent of her perfume, floral and warm, lingering even after she moved away. The way her laugh was soft, but edged with something unspoken when I made a clumsy joke about a misshelved novel. The subtle dark circles beneath her eyes, evidence of nights that were either too long or too restless. "Are you okay?" I asked eventually, slower than I needed to be, careful. My voice cracked slightly, betraying my concern. She paused, one hand on the edge of the counter, and for a moment her eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. Then her gaze hardened just enough to make me doubt everything I thought I saw. "I'm fine," she said, curt, but the edge in her voice didn't quite mask the fatigue beneath. She gave a short exhale, shoulders tense, before moving to the next shelf. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to reach out and ease whatever burden was settling across her, but she didn't offer an opening. So I watched instead. Watched the way her fingers lingered on a book cover a second too long, how she occasionally exhaled sharply, how her eyes flicked to the door as if expecting someone else, someone important. And yet, even guarded, there was a pull I couldn't resist. Something forbidden and fragile between us. Tiny sparks that sparked without acknowledgement. A shared glance over the top of a book. A moment where our hands nearly touched while reaching for the same copy of a collection of poetry. That fraction of a second stretched, electric and dangerous. "Thanks," she murmured finally, barely audible, when I handed her the last book. Her eyes caught mine, and for a moment, just a moment, the wall slipped. Her shoulders eased, her lips twitched, and her hand hovered near mine longer than it needed to. Then she stepped back, clearing the fragile space between us. The tension lingered in the air, unspoken, unsaid, and somehow heavier for it. I left that day with the image of her hand frozen midair, the ghost of a smile brushing her lips, and I realized I would replay that small, quiet, charged moment over and over until I saw her again. The rain had started quietly. Then suddenly, the storm made the bookstore windows rattle. I stayed later than usual, shelving returns, while Marianne sorted invoices behind the counter. The hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional thunder were the only interruptions. We were closer than usual, standing shoulder to shoulder as we moved boxes from the back room. I felt the heat of her arm brushing against mine and had to remind myself to breathe normally. The air smelled faintly of wet pavement and coffee she'd left cooling on the counter. "Do you ever feel like things pile up?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. Her fingers fiddled with a receipt, twisting it nervously. I sensed the vulnerability before the words even landed. "Sometimes," I said softly, careful not to overstep. She glanced at me briefly, her eyes flitting away immediately, back to the papers in front of her. Her hand trembled just slightly as she stacked them. The sound of a phone buzzing on the counter made both of us jump. She glanced down at the screen, her brow furrowing. "It's just a friend," she muttered, but the hesitation in her voice was clear. She answered quickly, shoulders stiff, nodding even though I couldn't hear the other side. I could see the strain in her jaw, how she chewed at her lip as she spoke. When she hung up, she leaned against the counter, and I stepped a little closer without thinking. The space between us was small, electric, and dangerous. My pulse thumped so loudly I could almost hear it in my ears. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. She caught my gaze briefly, then looked away. "I didn't realize it was this late," she said, voice low, almost hesitant. The softness made my chest ache, because it sounded like she was on the edge of saying more, of letting some secret slip, but she didn't. A flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by a low rumble of thunder. I took a step closer, thinking I'd offer her a hand to steady the stack of invoices she was gripping too tightly. My fingers brushed hers, and the jolt of contact was sharper than the storm outside. She froze, eyes wide, caught in that moment between acknowledgement and retreat. My own hands lingered, unwilling to pull away, as if inertia might allow the world to slow down for just 1 second. "I should," she began, voice tight, and the words stopped abruptly as the front door opened. A delivery man stepped in, breaking the tension instantly. She straightened, her hand retreating behind her, the invisible wall snapping back into place. I swallowed hard, feeling the electricity dissipate, replaced by the ache of almost touching, almost saying, almost letting go of restraint. I forced myself to focus on the invoices, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew it wasn't gone. Even as the rain hammered against the windows, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my mind. The small contact of her hand, the tremor in her voice, and that look she gave me, like she wanted something she couldn't admit. I left that night with the taste of near confession lingering in my mouth, wondering how long it would be before we came close again, and if either of us would survive it. I found her sitting on the floor behind the counter, knees drawn up, arms resting across them, the bookstore dark except for the dim glow of a single desk lamp. Rain tapped insistently against the window, slow and steady, a backdrop to the quiet tension that had been building between us for weeks. I didn't know what compelled me to sit beside her. Maybe it was the storm outside. Maybe it was that something inside me had finally snapped, unable to carry the weight of the unsaid any longer. I didn't reach for her hand. Not yet. Just sat close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, yet far enough to respect whatever fragile line she had drawn. "Do you ever regret things?" she asked suddenly, her voice small, almost swallowed by the hum of the fluorescent light. I froze. The question wasn't directed at me, but it landed like a stone in the center of my chest. "Sometimes," I whispered, careful not to sound too eager. My throat was tight. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed somewhere on the scuffed floorboards, tracing lines only she could see. There was a long silence. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but heavy, laden with everything we weren't saying. I wanted to break it, to offer something. Anything. But the truth was, the tension was enough. It was already saying more than I could. "I don't know what this is," she continued, voice cracking slightly. "Or if it should be anything." She swallowed hard, jaw working. I noticed the way her hands flexed and unclenched, trying to find some rhythm in the chaos of her own mind. I wanted to tell her I knew, that I felt the same impossible pull, but the words stuck somewhere behind my teeth. Instead, I nodded slowly, careful not to breathe too loud, careful not to make the moment feel smaller than it already was. I don't want to lose control," she admitted, the edge of panic creeping in despite her deliberate calm. "And maybe I already have." Her confession wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was raw, unfiltered, and it tore through the careful boundaries we'd built around ourselves. We sat there, side by side, both quiet, both aware that the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. We couldn't pretend anymore that this was normal, that our interactions were just casual, harmless moments in a day. Everything was charged now. Everything meant something. I kept my eyes on her profile, memorizing the small details, the curve of her neck, the faint furrow in her brow, the way her lips parted slightly as she exhaled. I wanted to speak, to tell her it was okay, that nothing needed fixing, that we could sit here like this forever. But I didn't. Sometimes, silence is the only honest answer. Finally, she lifted her gaze, eyes glistening in the dim light. And in that instant, the storm outside didn't matter. The books, the counter, the world, it all fell away. "What if I'm not supposed to feel this way?" she whispered. Her words sank into me like a weight I hadn't expected to carry. And I realized, in that heartbeat, that we were both trapped in a tension neither of us could name, a pull neither of us could deny. I didn't answer. I just let the silence stretch, knowing it said everything. And she, finally, exhaled, a soft, broken sound that left the room heavier than the storm itself. I came in that morning carrying a box of returned books, expecting the usual quiet hum of the bookstore. But Marianne was sitting on a low stool near the back, holding an old, worn envelope. The edges were frayed, the paper yellowed like it had been waiting for years to be opened. Her fingers traced the corner of the envelope as if memorizing every crease. She looked up when I stepped closer, eyes wide but hesitant. I didn't think I'd ever." She stopped, voice catching, like she was trying to measure whether it was safe to speak. "Hey," I said gently. "You don't have to." She shook her head, the motion small but firm. "No, I want to." She drew a breath, long and unsteady. "It's from him. From years ago, before everything changed. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle between us. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt heavy in a way that demanded attention. She didn't look at me as she continued, voice barely above a whisper. I loved him, she said finally. I thought we had forever. But I was too young, too scared, I guess. And one day he was gone. Just gone. Her hands gripped the envelope tightly, knuckles pale. I watched her, noticing the small tremor in her lips, the way her shoulders curved forward, burdened by something old and heavy. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't performing grief. She was letting me witness it, letting me see a crack in the armor she always wore so confidently. I wanted to say something comforting, but what words could possibly fit here? So I stayed quiet, just stood beside her, letting the presence be enough. You remind me a little of him, she admitted, almost shyly, eyes darting to mine and away again. Not in looks, not exactly, but in how you notice things, how you linger, how you care. Her confession struck me more than anything she could have said romantically. It wasn't about desire, it was about recognition, about being seen in a way she hadn't allowed anyone to see for a long time. I don't want to be anyone from your past, I murmured, careful, honest. I just want to be here now, with you. A small, almost imperceptible smile flickered across her face. She nodded, still gripping the envelope. I know. We didn't touch. We didn't need to. And yet, somehow, the space between us felt smaller. Somehow, the weight of her past, and the quiet acknowledgement of it, had shifted everything. I noticed the soft exhale she let out, the first real one of the morning, like a storm she had been holding inside, had finally loosened. Her gaze lingered on the envelope, then on me, and in that glance, I understood something fundamental. She was still fragile, still tethered to a heartbreak that hadn't healed, but she was willing to let me stand beside her anyway. It was a quiet moment, almost fragile in its normalcy, yet seismic in the way it pulled at something inside me. And as she tucked the envelope back into the drawer, her hand brushing mine ever so slightly, I realized I hadn't expected to feel this close to someone just by standing still. But I did. The storm had passed, leaving the air cool and damp. I found her in the back corner of the bookstore, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a stack of unsorted books around her. I sat down opposite her without asking, letting the quiet settle between us. No words were needed. The silence spoke louder than anything we could force out. Her eyes lifted to mine, tired but steady, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look away. I could see the small scars in her expression, the little hesitations that had always kept her distant, and somehow, it didn't feel heavy anymore. Just human. I don't know what this is, she said softly, voice almost reverent. Or if it's right. But I don't want to pretend it isn't here. I nodded, careful. We don't have to define it. We just can be. I replied, letting the words linger in the empty space. It wasn't about labels or expectations. It was about presence, about acknowledging what had quietly grown between us, without forcing it into a shape that didn't fit. Her hand shifted slightly, brushing against mine as she reached for a book. The contact was brief, accidental, but it carried the weight of months of unspoken tension. I didn't pull away. I let my fingers brush hers again, lingering just enough that it felt deliberate without breaking the fragile normalcy we had built. We sat that way for a long moment, breathing together, letting the world shrink to the patch of floor between us. I noticed the little things, the way her cardigan slipped slightly off her shoulder, the faint scent of her hair mixing with the musty pages around us, the softness in her eyes when she looked at me without pretense. I've spent so long trying not to feel anything, she murmured, voice barely above the hum of the city outside. And now, I don't want to stop feeling it. I exhaled slowly, careful not to rush. Then we don't have to. We just keep being here. Like this. She nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that spoke volumes. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just a mutual understanding that what existed between us was enough, for now. It was earned, fragile, and utterly ours. Her hand shifted again, this time intentionally, resting lightly against mine. I let it stay. The simple warmth of her skin grounded me, more than words ever could. We didn't speak, didn't move. We didn't need to. The connection had settled into the small, steady rhythm of breathing and shared space. The bookstore around us felt alive in its quiet way. The hum of the lights, the faint rustle of pages, the distant echo of footsteps outside. And in that ordinary, imperfect setting, something extraordinary had finally settled, something neither of us could deny. I leaned back slightly, letting my shoulder brush hers, just enough to be close. She rested her head lightly against mine for a fraction of a second, and it was the kind of contact that would never make headlines. But it made every hesitation and doubt of the past months dissolve into something tangible. No words followed. No promises were made. Just the quiet acknowledgement of what had always been there, waiting patiently in the small spaces between gestures, glances, and silences. And for the first time, I felt the weight of uncertainty lift. We didn't need more than this. It's been weeks since that night in the bookstore. I still remember the rain tapping against the windows, the dim glow of the lamp, the quiet space we shared without needing words. I think about it often, not like a memory you file away neatly, but like a faint pulse that lingers beneath everything else. Marianne is still Marianne, confident, guarded, luminous, but something subtle has shifted. I can see it in the way she allows small silences to stretch, in the little pauses where she looks at me without veiling curiosity or caution. She's still careful, but now she trusts that someone is paying attention in the right way. Someone who notices, who doesn't demand explanations or labels, just presence. And me? I've learned patience in a way I didn't know I could. I've learned to sit in a room with someone I care for, feeling the tension, the pull, the vulnerability, without needing to fix it or name it. I've learned that love, if this is love, isn't always loud or declarative. Sometimes it's the weight of a hand resting lightly against yours, the steady rhythm of shared breaths, the acknowledgement of another person's scars without trying to erase them. We still live in the gray, in the unsaid, in the in-between moments where the world feels ordinary yet charged with meaning. But the gray is no longer uncomfortable. It's ours. There's an intimacy in quiet, in subtle gestures, in trust that has been earned and is still fragile. That's what's changed, the nature of our connection. I catch myself replaying the small moments over and over. Her fingertips brushing mine while handing over a book, the almost smile when I noticed the tremor in her hands, the way she let her head lean against me for just a second without asking permission. Nothing monumental, nothing scripted, but enough to leave an echo that lingers. It's not perfect. It's not a fairy tale. There's no clean ending, no wrapping everything in gold ribbons. But it's real, human, messy in all the right ways. And maybe that's the point. That love, the kind worth having, doesn't always need fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it just needs patience, presence, and the quiet courage to let someone see you fully, even the parts you've carried alone for too long. I glance at the shelf beside me, where a copy of that old poetry collection sits, spine worn from fingers brushing over it, like a secret we've both carried. And I realize I wouldn't trade the way it unfolded, the small, almost invisible moments, for anything. So, this is where it ends, for now. Not with a bang, not with a confession shouted across a room, but with the soft, steady heartbeat of two people learning what it means to matter to each other, quietly, earnestly, completely. And if you've ever noticed someone in a way that makes your chest ache, or felt a pull you couldn't name, maybe you understand. Because sometimes, the most human stories are the ones that leave you thinking long after the last page, or last word, has passed. What small, quiet moment has stayed with you today?